All right, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Hope everyone is doing well today. It's good to see a good crowd this morning. Look, last night, some of you may have been with us. In fact, I see some names. Some of you made it. Some of you didn't know about it. We decided sort of last minute, Dave and Patty opened up their home and had sort of well, not sort of, but welcoming the Shabbat from their home in upstate New York. And it was really nice. And I think it gives us yet one more thing to do here in Horeb, and I think it's really really special. A lot of people said they enjoyed that time, and we hope to do it again. In fact, I hope they do it every Friday night. That may not be totally practical, and I may be putting them out on kind of out there making that declaration. But I think that their intention is, as they're able to do that, to have Friday evenings, and it was really nice. Patty sang a lovely song, lit the candles, and then they both kind of gave some of their thoughts about Shabbat, and others were able to jump in. So it was really nice. People from all over the world were there. So if you're able, keep your eye out here in Horeb in the Discord, and you'll see us post a notice when we're going to do that again. And I think maybe Friday evenings for Erev Shabbat going forward. We're going to attempt to do that. Okay, so we're in Terumah, the Parsha Terumah, and this focus of this teaching was on the Tavnit. It's one of my favorite subjects in the Pentateuch, particularly in the priestly writings. I just think it's fascinating, the Tavnit, even though, I may have different views theologically than some of you. This idea, and as you saw the way I took this class when I did teach it, I took it in a direction that some may not have anticipated or expected, and that is I focused on the grand purpose of the building. In other words, when the temple was made, what was it originally thought to be? And in some of the passages that I brought out, I made the point that it was meant to be a repository, a holder for the tent, the house of the tent. We read these texts. So that's kind of what I want to focus on in this after discussion, but I leave that up to you. Any of you who would like to come up on the stage and say a few words, offer some comments, some commentary, some questions, that is certainly welcome. And it's the reason we do what we do here on Saturday morning. So please join me on the stage. Is there anyone out there who would like to say a few words? Because again, my idea about what I want to look at and what I want to talk about may not be yours. What are some of your thoughts? Do any of you have views that are slightly different, or you want to talk? Here's Dave. Let me bring Dave up on the stage here. Dave, first of all, thanks, brother. I appreciate you and Patty opening your home last night. That was really special, and hopefully, hopefully,
we're going to do it every. We're going to do it every.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. Well, hang on. Yeah, so you're telling me, Dave, that you're of the opinion that we have complicated and obfuscated a direct path to God in all of our religious ideologies? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, man. Hey, I appreciate it. And look, I look forward to next Friday night. We're going to do a better job, Dave. You were traveling all over the world during the week, and Patty was busy with the business, and Seth and I were both tied up on. Anyway, we didn't. I didn't get the word out quick enough. I think we're going to try to get that out a lot quicker and let people know about it. So be ready for. Uh, Look, let me tell you, Dave. We can put 300 people now in this room. And right now we have 24 in the audience here and some of our dear friends on YouTube. You people have got to do a better job. Go out into the highways and byways and invite them in, just like I'm going to invite JJ to the stage right now. Dave, thank you, brother. All right, I'm going to invite JJ to the stage. JJ, how are you, my friend? Shabbat Shalom. Let's see, did you come? Where are you? I, I invited you to the stage. I don't know what happened. Maybe you lost connection. Raise your hand again, JJ. In the meantime, I'm going to bring Sue up to, well, there he is. There's JJ. Let's try this again. All right, JJ, let's see if I got you this time. What? Yeah, welcome. Welcome, my brother. How are you?
One. Hey, I liked one of the things that Dave said in kind of going like about like them asking for a king. I just wondered because it seemed like there was very specific uh, uh, diagrams, like in the visions or whatever, about the building the temple. So I don't know if was that a similar situation to them like asking for a king, like they had, God was completely happy in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, but then if people were asking so much that he just said, you know what, if this is what you want, this is what I'm going to
Yeah.
give you. It may not be what I want, but if it's what you want, then
Yeah. Well, I don't want to answer for Dave, JJ, but that's a good question. But I think the main point, I've made this same point in my thinking. There seems to be, and I don't know how to describe it other than to say there seems to be maybe an initial, this is God's plan, and then this is God's plan when people start asking for different stuff, and He allows them to have what their heart desires, even though it wasn't what He originally wanted, kind of thing. And I think that the one might suggest that God originally wanted a tabernacle because of so much of the material in the Pentateuch is centered on particularly from Exodus chapter 25 through the end of the book of Bamidbar in particular, but Numbers. So the idea, someone might argue and say, no, 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 this was God's original idea. Well, what if we took this back? And this is more of a question than it is some wisdom-filled response, JJ. Maybe you can help me. What if we went back to the Garden of Eden and we, let's say we took this story somewhat literally, that there was a garden eastward in Eden where God placed Adam and his woman Eve is made there, and they're living there, and they commune with God, and they walk with Him in the cool of the day. Had that continued to exist, let's just hypothesize. Let's say that they did not eat from the forbidden fruit. Could we imagine that that was what God desired, was for God to be able to commune with man and woman in this holy place where there was no sin? Could we imagine that, or am I just going too far with this analogy? Because I want to build on this.
Yeah, go ahead and build on it. I mean, that seems like it was original plan, and I guess
Yeah,
he makes decisions, based on what, the things that we're doing, whether
yeah,
right or wrong, the things that we're doing, the decisions that we make, and uh, and he'll figure out how to bring it all back.
yeah,
And
and yeah, I agree, and I think some of it is I don't think we're going to catch God by surprise and mess up His plans. So He says, "Oh, they're at it again, foiled once again by Ross's stupidity. Let's rework this plan because humanity has messed me up again. They've tricked." I don't believe like that, but I believe that God works around our failings and our problems and so forth. So, and I don't want to go too far in this because I want to allow you and other people to express your views. But here's my thought. So, if you think about it, what if the original plan was what is described somewhat we see in the Garden of Eden? Mankind and God are in close harmony, and it's paradise. And then until sin is found, I'm reminded of Ezekiel 28 in the story. It's about the king of Tyre, but fundamentalist Christians are told that it's talking about Satan. Until iniquity was found in you, you were among the stones of fire in the Garden of Eden, and then you were cast out and so forth. But it's like once mankind is pushed out of the garden, from that point on, it's an accommodationist relationship. It is God is allowing things that were not in the original plan. And I think a lot of those are things that we've considered. This is the inspired holy, this is the way it was supposed to be. A tabernacle. Imagine when they built the temple and people say, hey, what about all these Torah readings about the tabernacle? And, look at the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is supposedly the central piece of everything in this holy place. And yet Jeremiah 3:15 says a time is coming when you'll not ask for it, you won't miss it, another one won't be made. And yet what do you do when you get to those passages? What about Passover? Again, Jeremiah 16, Jeremiah 23. Time is coming when it will no longer be said, the Lord lives who brought the children of Israel up out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord lives who. What do you do about all the Passover stuff? I may be pushing these to the edge, but I know when Dave and I have had these private conversations at length about what was the original ideal, ideal, and what came to be. I think we see so much of the biblical story is reaction to the failings of God's people. The monarchy is a huge example. I think that the temple itself was an accommodation. So anyway, I'm kind of going on, and I'm not allowing good enough comments on your part, JJ. What are some of your views? And by the way, I see several people have their hands raised. We're
yeah,
getting to you.
yeah, I'll go ahead and give the stage back up. I know yeah, I just that was just my thought, just like I'm still trying to learn, I'm still trying to understand. So I really appreciate how you go into, detail trying to explain a lot of things that we may not think about or from a different perspective than we may be accommodating used to. So no, it's all good, and I just appreciate all the conversation. I'm going to give the stage up to
Well,
the next
wait,
question.
before you go, first of all, I really look forward to seeing you face to face. I met you at the conference in Charlotte, and I'm excited that you're coming again. You strike me as someone who is a deep thinker and a really, really deep studier. And you wrote me, I think, about Japanese. Do you know Japanese? Something about the captions weren't absolutely correct. Is
Oh
that right?
yeah, yeah. So I'm familiar with Japanese, and when you were had your discussion on the wilderness of sin uh, for a couple
Yeah.
weeks in a row, the Japanese translation was the wilderness of missing the mark, not the wilderness of sin. It was
Ah, because it
the
translated it sort of.
right, right. So
Well,
I
let
saw
me
that, and I
real
was like,
real quickly though, is
yeah.
it fairly decent? Because I don't know Japanese, and what I do is we have some pretty good stats on where people are following our classes, and believe it or not, Japanese is pretty high, and
Mhm.
so I always try to do the captions. I have 14 languages, and Japanese is one. I'm hoping that it gets close enough. So, would you say it's fairly? I mean, considering that a country boy from Louisiana put those up using automatic translator.
I'd say it's pretty good. I'd say it's really good. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
a couple things here and there, and if you're reading it for the first time and not understand the context, that one might throw you for a loop
Yeah.
until you get around to discussing it.
Cool stuff. Hey,
Um,
man, I
but
look
yeah, no,
forward
I
to seeing you.
appreciate that, and I do promote it to my Japanese friends as well. So hopefully, there's some of the
Good
folks
deal.
watching it.
Hey, thanks,
All right,
JJ. All
thanks.
right, looking forward to seeing you. All right, I'm going to invite Sue to the stage. Sue, welcome. It's good to have you, my friend. Hey, it was good to see you last night. I think you enjoyed it as much as I did and said so, being with Dave and Patty in their home.
Oh, it was wonderful. I am so happy that we're going to be doing that. I know they can't do it every Shabbat, but as many as possible. That would just be wonderful.
Good,
Um,
good.
for the comments today, I agree with you entirely about how God accommodates us. That's why I I don't talk, I don't try to convince anybody about anything having to do with God because they're on their path and God's accommodating his approach to them based on their culture and their understanding and I don't know all of that. So
Yeah,
all I can do is share my own experience of Yehovah and let him do with that what he will. And one of the evidences we have of that accommodation is in Ezekiel verse 20 or chapter 20, and God says, so I gave them other statutes that
yeah,
weren't good
that's
and
right.
laws through which they couldn't live.
Yep,
And that was because that's what they wanted. And he said, okay, you want it, you got it.
yeah,
Here you go. And I was really, really interested in your teaching on the tabernacle, what happened to it. When we were living in Jerusalem and studying with the rabbis there, one of the things they really beat into our heads is that once something is declared holy, that's it. It's holy
yeah,
forever and ever and ever. And which is why we've observed Shabbat, even though lots of Orthodox tell us not to, because it was made holy at the
right.
beginning of time. So we observe it as a holy day. Well, um, the tabernacle was holy.
Yeah,
And so it would have been brought into the only thing that puzzles me and that we've been trying to research is how did Jerusalem get in, how did it end up being named the holy place?
right.
Whereas it was Shiloh for so long, and I would love to hear a teaching on how Jerusalem ended up being the holy mountain. But at any rate, assuming that it really was declared by God to be the holy place, then
Yep,
yeah, the tabernacle would have been brought into it because just like when the altar was defiled, it had to remain on temple grounds
Yeah.
because it was holy. It couldn't go anywhere else. It had to be in a holy place.
Well, those are excellent points. You know, it is very very interesting too. When you look into everything about Jerusalem. Now, one view could be, well, you know, David is a master politician. I mean, if you took out, let's say you took out all of the things that we as spiritual people look to in the text, and, you know, God chose this place and directed David. I mean, we can put that in there. But let's say you just look at David as a historical figure, which that requires faith too, by the way. But when we do, I think David is a masterful politician in the sense that it's through David that we get a lot of the orderly things with which the kingdom of a united monarchy is built. You have Jerusalem is situated in a place that's neither the northern kingdom nor the southern kingdom. In the United States, God forgive me for saying this, but it's like Washington, D.C. It's nothing like Washington, D.C. Please don't think I'm being political here. But the idea is that it's sort of a no man's land. And so it's perfect. You know, one can't claim, well, this belongs to me, this belongs to me. So there are things like that, but then there's a deeper study that I think is important, and maybe I can get David and Patty to work with me on putting something together on, because we've had these conversations about Zion, Mount Zion, and how that in and of itself seems to be a very, very fascinating study. And of course, you bring in Melchizedek. Is that a person? Is it an office? Is it, you know, what's he doing in a place called Salem? You know, and is that Jerusalem? So, look, I can, you can tell I get excited when you bring up Jerusalem, and I mean I love Jerusalem, and I think that there is a reason, very good reason, it becomes the place. And so if maybe we can do that, maybe we'll do that sooner rather than later. How's that sound, Sue?
That sounds great. I would love to hear that. I have I've done a lot of research on it myself, and I have some ideas, but I'm not didactic about it. I can't be confident that my
Well,
conclusions are accurate.
Well, what I'm more interested in, even, and when I say David and Patty and I might do something, we might have something where we host it, but it's only to kick things. We want your views, some of your studies, and bring in other people as well. So your views and some of the things that you've researched and other people are certainly not only welcome but encouraged, and perhaps we'll all learn by listening to some of the things that you've done. So when this comes about and we do this study and discussion, I think that's a good topic to put as a major event. Maybe we'll get some people. So get your notes out, blow the dust off of them, get ready, and you might be working on this now. I'm assuming this is something you did a while back.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful Sabbath, Sue. Good to see you. Julia, I'm going to invite Julia to the stage. There she is. Hello, hello. How are you today? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. How are you today?
Okay. All right. Um, I'm going to speak on one of the things that David said. Um, I think that this Bible is a guidebook. And when one of the stories that we were told was about the Tower of Babel, when people wanted to make a name for themselves,
Yeah,
I think that's still, I think it's in there because this is one of the main problems that we have. Whether it is an individual or a group, I think we get in trouble because that is what ends up happening. And that doesn't mean when people intentionally do that, it can also mean when people think I'm, when they have good intentions.
yeah.
Problem that you can fall into so easily is that I think one of our things that ego gets us in trouble.
Yes, indeed.
Like you said, I think that's when God uh, does the accommodating, but it can get you in trouble. It really can. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we need to watch out as individuals all the time.
Yep.
It can be something that happens and you're not even paying attention to, and it's what happens.
You ever
The
hear
other
that
thing I want,
expression? What? Let me ask you. Have you ever heard that expression? And I don't necessarily theologically align with this anymore, but I used to hear people say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? It's almost. It might be a little
yes,
bit blunt, but that. I mean, hey, a lot of people think a lot of things, but that doesn't mean it aligns with God's perfect will. Go ahead, Julie. I'm sorry.
right. The other thing I was going to talk about too in the Messianic age, when you were
Uh huh.
talking about the temple, now what we have to go on is prophecy. We have what is there because, like you said before, there we are in a place of the word of God not coming to us. But if in the Messianic age that changes and everyone will know, we'll have different instructions. And people might be looking, going, I thought because of the prophecy it says this. Well, when all of us, when the whole world knows, we'll have different instructions.
Right.
So, you know,
I'm listening. I'm
that's all
grabbing
I want to say.
another Bible. I'm
I
just grabbing another Bible. I have
I
Bibles
got
all
you.
over the place. I didn't mean to walk
Yeah.
off on you.
But that's okay. But that's what I wanted to say. And, one of the things when you look at too, when there's so much in social media and influencers, and I'm like, oh, it's just such a slippery slope. We just walked right in. So that's all I want to say.
Hey, good comments as usual. I appreciate your input, and I would agree. And I think a lot of times, you know, the old expression, "Be careful what you ask for." Because
Right,
God,
right.
a lot of times God, when the people ask for something, all right, it's like, okay, if you really want that, then let's make sure that we here's the rules around it. But certainly there are times where God gives in to the accommodating request, and it usually does not turn out well. People said, look, in the wilderness, God's feeding them manna, and they said, we're tired of it. We are sick of this bread. I tell you what, I want some meat. And they asked for quail. Or God said He's going to give them. Remember in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, give them enough quail until it comes out their nose. A classic example of be careful what you ask for. You want this. I'm
Right.
going to give it to you until you are sick
That's
of it.
right.
And I
Yeah.
think we have to be careful because, yeah, you're right. I mean, people often ask for it, and
And I and I
yep,
I love the class because when you brought up the Tavnit, it's like those instructions were so detailed.
yep,
What was the purpose?
yep.
So thank you, thank you. That's all I
Hey,
have.
good deal. Look, I'm going to take one of the questions. I'm about to bring Bob, I'm inviting you to the stage, but if you hold on one second, what I want to do is, while you're getting situated, there's a comment coming in from YouTube that I wanted to bring up, and it's from Belinda in Texas. Hello, Belinda in Texas. Belinda says, if the tent was in the temple, wouldn't it have burned up? And that is an excellent question. Obviously, one of our typical audience friends who loves to dig in and they think this through. Here's one possible reason why A, the tent could have been in the temple, and B, not been destroyed. And it comes from Maccabees, from 2nd Maccabees chapter 2. Now, some of you are saying, well, Ross, I don't believe 2nd Maccabees. I happen to be one who thinks this is worthy of consideration. 2nd Maccabees chapter 2 says the following. One finds in the records that the prophet Jeremiah ordered those. By the way, one finds in the records. The Greek word there now, it's like this is indicating that there is an oracle, if you will, of Jeremiah that we don't possess. And those of you who followed our class series on Jeremiah can imagine that could be the case. Now, here it says, Jeremiah ordered those who were being deported to take some of the fire, as has been mentioned, and that the prophet, after giving them the law, the Torah, instructed those who were being deported not to forget the commandments of the Lord or to be led astray in their thoughts on seeing the gold and silver statutes and their adornment. And with their similar words, he exhorted them that the Torah should not depart from their hearts. Verse 4, it was also in the same document that the prophet, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark should follow with him. And he went out to the mountain where Moses had gone up and had seen the inheritance of God. So we'll talk more about that, but I just wanted to give you that, Belinda. 2 Maccabees 2, and it's one of the theories. I base it on my research when I was working on the Moses scroll. I do believe that the ark, now I'm talking about the ark that Moses made, not the one that Bezalel and Aholiab made. I'm talking about the ark in Deuteronomy chapter 10 and in the Moses scroll, just a regular box to hold the 10 words. I think that and the tent and all of that went across the Jordan, Transjordan, and was put in a cave. But that's my view. All right. And Bob, welcome. Shabbat Shalom, my friend. How are you? I know you've been busy
Shabbat.
and you've had your family's in my prayers. I hope everything today, it's good to see you on Shabbat. Good to see you.
You too. Listening today, I was questioning, the material for the temple, if it was came from people willingly. But I got to thinking, I think I remember that David had stored up money and materials for the building of the temple.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and then later, I think it was Rehoboam, maybe the people complained that Solomon taxed them so hard
yeah.
and conscripted people to go work on it. It was a forced thing as opposed to voluntary. And then just, I guess, symbolically looking at the difference of a house built for him, the tabernacle that was built by people and with things from people that wanted him,
Yeah.
that wanted something, as opposed to it being taken from them and forced upon them. Just the contrast there is pretty stark.
Yeah, it's an excellent observation, Bob. I tell you, one of the things as you were talking, if you look at 1 Kings 8, one of the early parts of Solomon's reign, Solomon dedicates the house to the name of Jehovah, and everybody, recognizes that. But by the time you get to 1 Kings 11, now remember, all of chapter 8 deals with the dedication of the temple, and you can look closely at 9, 10. By the time you get, it's very early. Solomon goes off. In fact, I've got my views of Solomon, and I promise you, they're not nearly as glorifying as most people on this list right now. Solomon was bad from the get-go. He has one of the priests exiled who happens to be that family. Later is the family that Jeremiah attains the priesthood through. Long story short, 1 Kings 11, verse 7. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem, Mount of Olives. And he did the same for all his foreign wives who offered incense and sacrifice to their gods. Everybody just loves this Solomonic temple. Well, Solomon would build a temple for any god. He didn't care. Look, if you're one of his women and, he wants to make you happy or make your people happy, he'll build your God a temple. He doesn't care. Not a godly king. Not a godly king. Now, I know the writers in the biblical world, you get sometimes where they really are torn because particularly Chronicles, because Chronicles is the official court record. It wants you to know, that Solomon is, this is the rightful heir. But you read Kings, it's on the street. It is telling the business. Same thing we get, by the way, between Chronicles' view of David and Samuel's view. If you only read Samuel, you would not get the story of David cheating, taking Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, and getting her pregnant. You read the story as Chronicles puts it, it just conveniently skips over all of that. So I see within the biblical text this healthy tension, a lot of people don't like me to say that, but it's true, between the story as it was intended, or the faith that was as it was intended, and some of the things that led to departures. So when you bring up that when you read the story of the temple, you don't get the same, like this was done, and maybe Solomon said, everyone bring as the Lord moves you. There's no mention of that. He's working these people to the bone, their fingers to the bone, to raise money, taxing, and he's really taking the resources from the northern tribes. Remember, he abuses them. He takes some of their cities, 10 cities he takes from the north, and gives them to the king of Tyre for furnishing building products. By the way, he must not have given him nice ones, because the king of Tyre didn't like that. But anyway, Bob, what are some of your other thoughts in that? I know I kind of took us down a different trail, but when you mentioned that, I really thought about it. It is a good point. It's a totally different feeling when you read between the building of the tabernacle and the building of the temple.
Yeah, just today's the first time I really saw that contrast, but that's all I had.
Hey, good point. Hey, my brother, good to hear from you, and I look forward to hopefully see you in April at the conference.
Sure.
All right, thanks. All right, I'm going to invite Betty on the stage. Betty, it is good to see you here today. Did I get you up there? There you are. Hello, Betty.
Okay. Hi. Shabbat Shalom. Actually, I think someone was before me, but now I don't see her anymore.
Nope, I have
Karen.
somebody after you. I'm going to invite Karen up after you're
Okay.
finished.
Okay. I just didn't want to butt in. Two scriptures, they're not really related, but they kind of are. One is from Micah 6:8, and the other is Amos. But with Micah 6:8, that is the famous verse of, what does God require of you?
Yep.
But to do justly, love, loyalty, and walk humbly with God, or love, mercy, whatever.
Yep.
But I've heard some teach that it says only, like, oh man, only, or only, what does he require of you? But I don't see that in the Hebrew. Is it or is it not?
I don't know. I had to
I mean,
pull
it
it up.
says
Micah
Hagid Lach
6.
Adam. I don't
Micah,
see
hold on.
only.
Let me see.
Okay.
He
Oh,
has
it's not
told
Hagid,
you.
it's Higid.
Yeah, Higid Lecha. He has told you, oh man,
Higid.
Matov. Uma Yehovah Doresh from you. Well, I see where they may be getting that if they're saying, but, or only, they're translating the particle conjunction key. You see that? So it says, he has told you, oh man, what is good, and what does Jehovah seek from you, Memecha, ki im asot,
Right.
mishpat, but that you do justice and you love chesed. So
Okay.
I would
So
think
it's
that
the
they're
but.
translating the particle key as only. I wouldn't. But I see how you could get that. Do you see that? What they may be doing?
I do, but I mean that was my question. I just wanted to understand it the way it was written.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought that up is because I think several people had mentioned, Dave was one of them, and other people, maybe Ronnie, that it seems like, I don't know, why does man always want to embellish and try to make things better or add? I
Yeah.
mean, it's very clear. we're required to be just, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God.
Yeah.
That's the basis, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
I,
but
I
then
was
we
just
add
gonna
all of
I was
these.
just gonna I was
Go
just gonna
ahead.
add, I'm sorry, I was just gonna add that if somebody says, no, Ross, you and Betty are making this, just you're stripping it down to the bare bones. We really need a king, we need a priest, we need the temple functioning, we need all those things.
Mm,
I often think about, well, we haven't needed it for 2,000 years.
right.
And so the question becomes, do we really need, or could it be that in God's wisdom and in the way that things worked out, history obliged, and now we have everything we need to fulfill what it is that God really wants? I mean, He says, "I didn't desire sacrifice," so
Right.
maybe He never did. Sorry, I was
Uh,
agreeing with you.
no, 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 no. That was exactly my point, and thank you. The other thing has to do with the tabernacle, and I'm sure I don't think you brought it up. Maybe you did, and I missed it. The verse in Amos, Amos 9,
Hmm.
which talks about. I can just read it.
Yeah.
On that day, I'll
Hmm.
raise up the tabernacle of David. But their tabernacle is, it says sukkah.
That's
It
why I
doesn't
didn't.
use.
That's yeah. That's why I didn't bring it up. It is a different
So
word.
is that mixing it? I mean, it's still,
It,
and he
I,
says that he'll prepare the breaches and raise up its ruins. Um,
it could be related. It could be related to the fact that David himself, David's family, David's, it could be in that sense. I'd usually leave it out when I'm talking about the Mishkan because it is a different word.
right.
It just as you pointed out, the Sukkah of David.
But I
But
just wonder what that means then.
well, it is interesting because David, remember, we have four texts in the Hebrew Bible. I know a lot of people, religious people in particular, are very, air quote, messianic. Whether they're Christian, Hebrew
Mhm.
roots, Jewish, Orthodox, whatever. I believe in perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah, and though he tarry, I wait for him every day. It's one of the Jewish Maimonides, 13
Right,
articles of
right.
faith. Everybody, you go into New
Mhm.
York, you see billboards, we want Mashiach now, Mashiach, 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 Mashiach. And you know what the Hebrew Bible says about that? Nothing.
Mm,
It's very it's really absent. I'm talking about the term Messiah. But one of
exactly.
the things
Mhm.
that we see is people say, well, who is the Messiah? Messiah, son of David. And so one of David's sons is coming, and God's going to put him on a throne. And we have certain verses about the king
Okay.
that was come. Now, one final
Mhm.
point, all of that fast talk to lead us to this point. What it does say, four texts call us our attention to the fact that he, God, Jehovah, will raise up
Mhm.
David. Now, it's funny that so many people will, like if you look in the commentaries, Jewish and Christian, they go, oh, this is talking about the son of David. That's not what it says.
Mm.
The Bible has a
No,
way
it
to
says
say the
David.
son of David.
Right.
So could it
Mhm.
be that Amos 9 refers to is the sukkah, David is the sukkah of David, the tent of David, the
Mhm.
temporary dwelling, the booth of David. Is that referring to David himself being raised, perhaps, or
Mm.
to his descendants? Who knows? Just some thoughts.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, if you take the idea again, going back to the Mishkan, that or Asuli Mikdash, that Hashem says that I will um, where am I? Asuli Mikdash. I don't have the verse right now, but anyway, um, build me, a tent or a
Yeah,
tabernacle. Well, does that not also mean that we are to build that tent, that tabernacle in us, um, within our hearts? I mean, to
it
me, so that
certainly
he
is
can. Oh,
yeah, it is a spiritual
mhm.
interpretation, not just in Christianity, Judaism, has certain elements
No,
of this as
true.
well. So,
So that he can shekan with us.
yeah,
Um, and I realize the Shekinah or Shekinah
yeah,
is nowhere in the Bible, but also in those verses in Amos 9.
yeah,
If you go further down and read 13, 13, 14, 15, it talks about in the last days that God's going to come and plant the people in their
yeah,
own land, that they're not going to ever be plucked again.
right,
And I think you've brought that out. That's the only thing he says he's really going to plant, and that's the people. So if he plants us, then we hopefully will flourish.
yeah.
And anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Good thoughts.
Uh,
No, I appreciate you as
mhm.
always. Glad to see you made it today, and just do
Yes, I'm figuring out Discord little by little, but I didn't get on in time last night for the
well.
for the
That's
Sabbath
okay.
service, and
We will catch up. I owe you a phone call. I've just been
Mhm.
absolutely swamped, and I won't get into it here. It is Shabbat, and but we'll catch up. But you
No,
did
I
fine. You
know,
made it.
and I wrote you several times, and I said, "That's no problem. I know you have your life, you have your family, you have your teaching, and
Well,
no rush to call me." So,
my family, and my teaching was crazy this week. So we lived through it.
and it all
Everyone
blends
is
into one.
fine. It
Yeah.
did. It did. I even
Okay.
have become
I'm glad it's good.
I have even become an appliance repairman. You know, when you're not loaded with cash and you have appliances go out. Now, thankfully, Bridget is much more mechanically inclined and all that, but she lets me fix stuff with her directions sometimes, and I guess so. I feel like the tough man around the house or whatever. But she's anyway. We
Uh-huh.
lived through it. It was a tough week, but we're back to we have a washing machine again. Thank you very much. All right, hey
So you
Betty.
bounced back.
That's
Wonderful.
right.
Thank
That's
you.
right. Hey, thank you. And by the
Thank
way,
you.
your book is still doing well. And if people haven't got their copy yet, if they haven't ordered their copy,
Mhm.
get the copy. And it's called Hidden Sparks Beneath the Surface. It's you can find it on Amazon. In fact, if you go to the dialogue here on Discord on
Mhm.
Horeb, and you just filter so you only look at the book club, you'll see Betty's book is one of the ones that's
Oh,
posted here. So get your copy,
very good.
read it, and
Thank
thanks
you.
Betty for writing that book. It's a good book. I highly recommend it.
It was a labor of love that I was given to do.
Well, you did a
It
great
was a
job.
gift from me.
Very
And
good.
I have just one small thing, and that is that the other night I was reading the Parsha about Terumah and Terumah, however I know it's pronounced different ways,
Yeah.
and I was reading about the construction of the menorah. And I just happened to glance down on the table where I have my book. I still can't believe I wrote it, and I saw the picture that Daniel, the very talented
Oh
Daniel,
yeah.
uh, did of the menorah, and it actually has the flames on each side, the three and the three, with their wicks pointing towards the center, just like it does in Exodus. And I
Oh
thought,
great.
wow, that's really cool.
That
I
is cool.
just noticed it. So anyway, it's beautiful. Okay,
Did
that's it.
Daniel
Thank
do
you.
that? By the way, did Daniel do that drawing? I suppose he did, huh?
He did.
Okay. The
He
talented
built
man.
it. He said he built it himself.
Excellent. All right. Very
Yes.
good. Hey, Betty, have a beautiful day. Looking
Okay.
forward to seeing you in April, by the way. And
Me too.
you'll be
Me
giving a
too.
talk, so you need to make sure you get all your notes together.
Okay. And
Get ready.
I'll have some books if anybody wants them.
All
Okay.
right. Talk to you
Thank
later.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
I am bringing to the stage Karen. Karen, are you still with us? I know you've had
Yes,
your
I'm here.
hand up. Hey, how's it going today?
Good. I keep having to repeat to myself, Tavnit, Tavnit, so I don't forget it by the time I get to
You
talk
need
to
a
you.
pen. You need look. This is all you have to do.
No, I
Keep
need
this by
notes.
you at all times.
Right?
Tavnit. All right, let's do it.
A few weeks ago, we talked about the concept of divine order.
Okay.
Would
Yep.
Tavnit kind of qualify as something like that?
I think it probably could because, as I mentioned today, bana, to build, is the basic building block of the word tavnit, and it's very, very orderly. And to your point, I think there are 4 passages. I may have even gone through. I'm sure I did today. I wasn't writing down everything, but there are 4 places, if I recall, where God says, "Make sure, Moses, that you make this according to the pattern that I showed you in the mount." Very, very orderly and expected to be followed to the details. So,
Okay. And then there's something else that whenever I hear teachings on the temple and God dwelling in the tabernacle and things like that, and I don't know why, but Deuteronomy 23 always comes to my mind, especially
okay,
when we're talking about order, the order of things.
explain that a
It's
little
kind of a
bit.
weird, yeah, it's kind of a weird chapter. There's some obscure instructions in there.
Yeah,
Some of them I agree with. Some of them are quite humane and progressive for the time. Like the slave runs away, don't turn him away, let him hang out with you.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but there's one. It's 13 and 14 in a Christian Bible, and I think 14 and 15 in a Hebrew Bible.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's kind of weird. It talks about the tool, you use to bury what comes out of you.
yeah.
But then the next verse, I'll read it. Hold on. It says,
What verse? You're in Deuteronomy 23,
I'm in
and
15 in Hebrew. Yeah, and 23, verse 15. For the Lord your God goes along in the midst of your camp to rescue you and to deliver your enemies before you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, so that he should not see anything unseemly among you and would turn away from you.
yeah, yeah,
So, he doesn't, it's not just the tabernacle that's supposed to be holy, the camp's supposed to be
yeah.
holy. And he's not just dwelling in the camp, he is walking among the midst of you.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I just see, those, he wants to be among a people who are keeping his order,
Yeah,
who are doing the things that he wants them to do. And that, that's what sets you apart. That's what makes you holy. That's where, and that's where he is, not just in a tent
yeah.
or a or a temple.
Yeah, and we get this image. We get this image of an image. We get this idea that, according to the priestly writer in particular, where you have the tent of meeting is in the center of the camp, and the people they would watch, and they would see this form come and appear at the door of the tent of meeting, but that camp is that entire, it has zones of holiness. One of the things that Richard Elliott Friedman talks about is that we have lost in our modern sensibilities, our modern understanding of things. We no longer can really relate or understand these zones of holiness that are described in the Pentateuch. It just doesn't, these ideas are foreign, they're ancient to us now. But at the time, there really were, these ideas were, everything was governed by this, and it's like, but the difference in holy and profane, for instance, is common things. It's not necessarily, we tend to think of, we read that someone is unclean and therefore they're excluded. Well, it doesn't mean that they're dirty, like we tend to think dirty is unclean. But holiness and this idea of separation is real important. But yeah, when I read this 23 verse 13 and 14 in the English, I think it is, it is strange. There is this idea that there is this major separation. The question I'll leave people with on this topic is, imagine having to go outside the camp. What does that mean? You know, you can imagine a big campsite and you're in your tent and you have to go outside the camp to do whatever. Bring your trowel with you. But what if this camp is the size of Chicago? What does
Right. I always
outside the
wondered about
camp
that.
mean? Yeah. And
Or designated area.
yeah, where is that designated area? So I see Dr.
Maybe there were a
Tabor's
number
hand
of
is up.
them.
He actually one of his claims to fame is he discovered something about this at Qumran, but maybe he'll talk about that another time. But
And I'll make one more point.
yeah,
So, you know what? When I look at this in a lifestyle parallel, in Christianity, there's this concept of being fit for service. I don't know if
yeah,
that's in the Old Testament too. And, you know, I kind of see a parallel here. It's God has a hard time using someone whose life is a mess,
yeah.
you know, and there's this, you need to get your life in order. You
That's
need
right.
to clean up the camp. You need to keep camp clean.
Yeah,
And, anywho, maybe that's part of divine order, Tavnit, whatever, making yourself available.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that divine order. I love the idea of Tavnit, this idea of a
Mhm.
pattern, and we all like patterns. Patterns are something that we can all relate to, and we can follow these. And of course, you know, for biblical people have done this quite often. They've looked at the Garden of Eden and how it's set up with an inner part and then something on the outside, you know, and they compare that to the tabernacle and the temple. I think Ernest Martin wrote a book about this kind of thing. And then the Christian writings build on the same thing. So, this idea of pattern, types, and shadows, and how one thing points to the other is often picked up in that sense. So, good stuff. Good points. What else you
Okay,
got there,
well,
Karen?
I'm good. You can let somebody else talk now.
Hey, looking forward to seeing you at the conference in here in
Yes.
St. Francisville in a couple of months. By the way, I'm going to bring up Dr. Tabor on the stage, but before you take off, James, before you say something, I want to quickly touch a couple of the things that came up. One is, Belinda, you asked from YouTube, are you having a meeting or Pesach in April? It's the meeting is going to take place April 19, 20, and 21, and it's right before Passover because Monday evening after the conference, that Monday evening is Erev Pesach. It's the beginning of the festival on the Jewish calendar. So you can look on our website, uiwu.com or .org, and you'll see conference links and it'll show you about it. In fact, someone might even post that for me. Hello, Dr. Tabor. How are you, my friend?
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Good to see you.
I got my plane ticket today, so
Good deal. Good deal.
I'm coming down Friday and have to leave Monday to make it back for Passover evening.
Yep.
I hope a lot of you will come. It's really a time of lectures and all that, but also just hanging out, as we say.
Yeah.
So I was just going to make a comment about ritual purity from a history of religion standpoint. I went to the University of Chicago where a fairly famous professor, Mircea Eliade, you might know the name, have some of
Okay.
his books. Probably his most famous book and contribution is called The Sacred and the Profane. And he actually works on a definition of religion based upon that idea. This is an anthropologist and a historian of religions. And then Mary Douglas is a well-known anthropologist. Both of them passed away now. She's British. I never studied with her. And she wrote a book called Purity and Danger. And it's a very widespread idea throughout the globe, really. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Near East, temples everywhere had this idea. And the analysis that the scholars come up with is that the primary category are signs of mortality. In other words, menstruation is not a sin, it's not dirty. Semen is not a sin, it's not dirty. and so forth, touching a dead body, attending a funeral, any of these things. So I usually tell my students sex, blood, and death. Now you'd think sex would not be death, but because there's birth, there's death. So this idea of being a mortal human being, you're born, you die, even blood after childbirth, which obviously is not anything, So the most unfortunate thing is that we use the word unclean in English,
Yeah.
uh, and it just throws people off. Excrement is not considered defiling in some cultures, but obviously going into a temple, you would take care of those kinds of bodily functions beforehand,
Yeah.
and uh, restrooms outside, so to speak. So just to
Restrooms
make
around
that
back.
point,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're separating the profane, which is not a good word either, because we have words like profanity
Yeah.
that are much more negative. But the profane means the ordinary, the everyday, the
Common.
normal,
Common.
the common,
Yeah.
exactly. And the sacred means the special.
Yeah.
Okay. So all the words, as you pointed out, holy, I agree with you. You don't want to reduce it too much and say, I just mean special. Well,
Yeah.
it does mean special, but special in the context of what? In the context of what's called the sacred. So the idea would be just kind of common sense that everyday things it's why people dress up for church.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of thing. It's why if you go for a job interview, you try to look your best. You don't come in with dirty clothes and slouch in your posture and slur you want to
Yeah.
be sharp. You want to be together. Very similar to what uh, was just, now I forgot, Karen was just saying,
Yeah.
orderly
Order.
and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. Order.
So
A
it's
divine
all
order.
connected, and it's the opposite of chaos. It's the opposite of nature just going wild. We do it in our gardens, we do it in our lawns, we trim trees. If you let everything just go, you know, imagine, no toilets, no sanitation, nothing, then human life
Yeah.
becomes impossible.
Right.
So that's all that stuff is connected. And so I think more than anything, when you entered the sanctuary, as it's called, the set apart area, it's like almost like we'd say to our kids, sit up straight, pay attention, this is important.
Yeah.
And all those little signs of importance then come about.
Yeah.
And so, yes, at Qumran, the Dead Sea Scroll group, they talk about in the Dead Sea Scrolls having the toilets outside the camp, and they actually give a measurement of 2,000 cubits, which is 1,000 more than what was traditionally a Sabbath day's journey.
Yeah.
And the Sabbath day's journey is part of the same idea that you keep, inside your house versus outside, that kind of thing. So it does appear from the biological tests that we did, because of the parasites found in the areas we surveyed, that they did have their toilets outside the camp. But excrement per se is not ritually defiling, but it's just not appropriate, you might
Yeah.
say. It's not, obviously, it doesn't make you unclean until evening, or unclean for 7 days, or unclean for 40 days.
Right.
And in that case, unclean just means you don't do the quote sacred things until you're past that period, whatever it is. So often it's just till evening.
Yeah.
But it's really hard, you know, whether that's an accommodation to cultures of the time, whether it's sanitation, whether it's order, maybe it's all three. It's hard for us, to really
Yeah.
know, but it is fairly universal in various cultures all over the world, which usually would indicate that it goes back to very, very ancient roots. I don't
Yeah.
know about Asia and the so-called Orient, and maybe somebody that's traveled and lived there could tell us whether, I just don't happen to know whether in, say, China, in Confucianism or Japan, I
Mhm.
imagine the temples are also considered sacred in a similar way, but I just haven't read enough about
Yeah.
non-Western. But in the West, definitely. On my website, jamestabor.com, if you look under some of the documents on Greco-Roman religions, it's under the Jewish Roman world of Jesus, you'll find texts about going to a Greek temple, and it says that you can't go if you've been to a funeral,
Mm.
if you've had sexual intercourse that day, and so forth. So it's the same kind of thing, and yet they're not getting it from the Hebrew Bible. It's just
Yeah.
part of the culture. But the Hebrew Bible might have absorbed it from this ancient idea of the deity being immortal, and therefore you don't want to mix. It's
Yeah.
this idea of mixing, just like cloth and other kinds of clothing, and you don't mix the ordinary with the special,
Yeah.
because then it would make the special ordinary, you
Right.
know.
Yep.
So, and we do that in our speech. Certain language is appropriate and certain language is not appropriate.
Right.
You know, and I mean, we naturally follow it without even being told, I think. So,
Mm-hmm. Good deal.
okay. So that was just a little
No,
thing
great,
from
great
my back.
insights. I appreciate
Yeah.
you joining in and telling us some of that. In fact, a lot of what I was talking about today on these zones of holiness, as they're called, I've picked up from you and from Friedman. Friedman really says a lot about that in his work,
Yeah.
and
It's
Brettler as
pretty
well.
common.
Yeah.
One other
Good.
thing I'll say while I'm here about
Yeah.
the conference, I'm going to speak on something I've spoken before, but it's going to be fairly different. I won't say completely different, lest I sound like I've given up everything, but uh, I want to talk about a phrase that I coined a few years ago, restoring Abrahamic faith. But I want to push it in a direction that I've recently come to understand through things like the Moses Scroll, statements that we've made for years. What are the two things that Abraham never had?
Yeah.
Well, really more than two, but how about a
Yeah.
Bible? How
Mhm.
about a tabernacle?
Mhm.
How about uh, a king?
Yeah.
And so forth. So I'm going to speak on that, and the new edition of my book will be published by then, God willing, as we say, without a vowel, as we
Yeah.
learned to say from Gabori.
Yeah.
That's my intention. Uh, the official date is April 9th, but I actually expect it to be out before that. But I want to be sure I meet that deadline uh, for various reasons that I can explain when I speak. April 9th, April 9th is Nissan 1st, but it's also David Horitz's birthday. So I
Yeah.
want the book to be a birthday present for him, even though he's not with us anymore.
Mhm.
So I'll be talking about that. And I wanted to also clarify something Ross and I talked about that I brought up last week, and that is, don't confuse vegetarianism with sacrifice in a temple. They're not the same. And even though people who do practice, just eating plants, so-called plant-based diet, as I do, uh, sometimes confuse it, and they assume that the reason sacrifice is not to be is not ideal, like we talked about last time, Jeremiah 7, Amos 5, and so forth. I won't repeat all of that. Is not because you can't eat meat. You can eat meat, according to Genesis 9. You could argue that it's not ideal according to Genesis 1 and maybe Isaiah 11 and other passages, but it's not the same as sacrifice. So my understanding is that when Abraham, this is Abrahamic faith again, builds an altar, it's literally a slaughtering place to the Lord. What he's doing is he's taking the life of these animals with reverence before God and in thanksgiving. So he's not
Yeah.
a vegetarian. We know that from several passages. But instead of just going out with a, I'll be crude here to make the point. Pick up a crowbar and go out and whack an animal and then drag it in bleeding or something. It's a act. It's a sacred act. It's a weighty act. You can't give life back. You
Yeah.
have no power over life. So whenever you shed blood, Genesis 9 makes this very clear. There's responsibility involved. So the way animals are often slaughtered today would be very ungodly,
Yeah.
without reverence, without a sense of the animal's life and thanksgiving. So when people say, well, Abraham offered sacrifices, it depends on what you mean by that term. He's, in terms of, and of course, we have different strata in the Torah about what Abraham did or didn't do.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing you do as a herds person, because you're living off animals, you're not a farmer, is as you arrive at a place, you set up a sacred slaughtering place so that any kind of food that is eaten from the animals is sanctified. I'll use that word. It's set
Yeah.
apart, meaning this
Yeah.
is special. This is not just
It's
anything.
dedicated.
And
Yeah.
in the Torah, it also says even if you're out in the field hunting and you kill an animal, you take the blood and bury it. So that's an act of reverence again, to cover it and bury it. The idea that this, and it's what we heard about American Indians or Native Americans. I assume it's true. I'm no expert in that culture, but the idea that not like you apologize to the buffalo, but you regard it
Yeah.
as a gift and then use it very carefully as not something to be consumed in a rapacious way,
Yeah.
but in a kind of a caring way or a way of thanksgiving. So
One
since
quick
I
point. One
yeah
one quick point, and kind of just to comment off what you said. You and I think we've discussed this before, but I went through Genesis, particularly the patriarchal narratives, and I think there's 7 times where it says, and Abraham built there an altar and called upon the name of the Lord. And I was
yes
just curious, what is he doing? Is he slaughtering? And I'm not saying that he isn't, but I want to just bring this up. The word for altar, as you know, and many of our viewers know, is mizbeach, and mizbeach is tied to the root word zevach, which means to slaughter. Is what we would translate. So a mizbeach is a slaughtering place. But so I would assume that those occurrences, that part of his calling on the name of the Lord was tied to a ritualistic slaughter of an animal. But I want people to think about Joshua 22, very fascinating passage, and it's a rare view into the ancient world of Mizbeach. And over it talks about there's a problem. The people on the western side are coming to really crack down on the people on the east because they heard that there's building an altar, a mizbeach. And the answer that the people on the east say, these are Israelites, they say, no, you're wrong. This is not an altar for burnt offerings or other sacrifices, but it's a witness. In other words, and it says it over and over and over. You have to read Joshua 22. So there can be, in the ancient world, a place where someone would build a mizbeach and use it as a sacred place to call on the name of the Lord, but it has nothing to do with sacrifice or slaughter. So I
Yeah,
just
it's a
wanted to
good
bring
point.
that up.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I hadn't thought
interesting.
of that
Yeah.
recently. I remember you talking about it. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay, so I'm gonna go, you guys.
Hey,
Good to
thanks,
see you. Don't
James.
want to monopolize here, and look forward to seeing you in April and other places around the World Wide Web here as we
That's
all
right.
interchange in so many different ways. Bye bye.
Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to bring Miriam. Miriam, our friend, hopefully you are there. I see you. How are you today, Miriam?
Hopefully you can hear me.
Miriam, I can hear your voice perfectly, and it pleases me
Well,
greatly. Hallelujah.
great. I've been working on this to try to get back to
You
here and talk. Okay, here we go.
all right.
Oh, thank you, Dr. James Tabor. That was awesome.
Yep.
I have a question though. Slaughtering, I always questioned. Is slaughtering done in a sacred time or a holy time?
I think you mean in the sacrificial part, was that
The
considered
sacrificial part,
yeah.
exactly, yes.
Yeah. I think we could really dig into this, but when you say sacred and holy, I think both of those words are really tied to the same idea that there is a whenever the sacrifices were done according to the Pentateuch, it was always that in that context of setting apart a certain time and the ritualistic part. Now, James did mention, and this is a fact, that a person
Yes.
could slaughter, for normal consumption of meat. And but even in those cases where a person, say Deuteronomy covers this. So let's say a person can't, they're out hunting and they can't go, they're in the north of Israel. They're not going to bring that to the temple to sacrifice it, which according to Deuteronomy is the place where God put his name. They can kill it and eat it there, but it's the same special rules apply. We can't just take the life of something and not reverence that life and handle the blood
Amen.
properly. So yeah, to your point, all sacrifice and slaughter is to be done with the utmost of reverence and sanctity, but it's not always considered, sacrifice at the temple or the tabernacle or whatever. Good question, though.
Oh, great. Um, the zones of holiness,
Yeah.
and it does that apply to the temple only, or to synagogues, or I don't understand because women are always this not apart because
Yeah.
of certain times, whether it's childbirth or those women things.
Yep.
Okay? So most of the time, women are not allowed to be a part of holy things. And so therefore, it's like we're denied something that
Access,
we
maybe.
really want to be a part of, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, and it's a different world we live in now, isn't it? If we look at the
Yes.
ancient, if we look at the ancient list of who's allowed to function and officiate as a priest, and who, that people would, the ACLU would be up in arms, at some of this stuff. You can't have a dwarf, you can't have this, you can't have that, and there would be people filing lawsuits on the priesthood left and right. I guarantee you.
Yes.
But
Rules
here's
are through the roof.
they would be going crazy. I'm telling you, it'd be all over CNN and Fox, and you couldn't open up Twitter without reading about the latest lawsuit on the Jerusalem priesthood. But here's the thing: you are right in a certain degree about women being excluded from certain aspects or access, I should say. But first of all, there are things, just bodily functions, that would exclude, but only during the period where a person is having a flow. For instance, a woman is excluded from certain access to the camp and so forth. But that's separate from. First of all, let me also say that men also have occurrences and flow and so forth where
Yes.
they're excluded as well for a certain period of
Yes.
time. So, but again, I think when we talk about, you started with the question of zones of holiness. That's just the way we describe it. But let's think about almost access, and go back to what Dr. Tabor was saying. You have certain things which take you. They're common. They're common things. It's not a man or a woman didn't do anything wrong. They're not unclean, like dirty. They have just had an experience which is common. It's normal. It is a part of our human existence. And because they've experienced that, according to these zones of holiness, they are not welcome inside, in the innermost, if you will. Now, when it comes to the temple, there were areas where only the priest could enter, and then there were only areas where the high priest could enter. We talk about, especially as you go from the tabernacle to the temple, as that system developed, it really, really took on more detail than even what is described in the Pentateuch. I remember when I first got into biblical studies, and I would look at diagrams of the temple, and I would see here is the court of the women, here's the court of the Gentile, here's the court of the priest. You as you develop the religion into the Second Temple period, you begin to see even more and more and more and more boundaries. Whereas what we see in the biblical, in the Pentateuch in particular, we don't see nearly that development. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
one more point that you made, which is real interesting, in modern Orthodox settings, Judaism, modern Orthodox Judaism, we see that women are excluded in some ways. And a big thing, Jonah and I did a show on this years ago. There was a big fight at the Western Wall, and that is because the ultra Orthodox who are in charge of prayer at the wall, had set up a very small, let me say, a smaller section for the women than the men. And as it turns out, quite often you have more women desiring to pray at the wall than you do men. And so
Yes.
the women were saying,
Yes.
hey, they're kind of like you are, Miriam. They got a question like, hold on just a second. You have 5 men. Oh, now I'm just exaggerating for the point. You have just a few men. We have a bunch of women. Can we not even this up a little bit? And the answer was no. And ultimately, this fight raged even now, and there's a section a little bit off to the side where they're trying to placate the women by saying, we're going to make you another section where you have a little more room. but the biblical writers, even though among the priestly material and even some of the stories, we see men tend to get the upper hand and women don't have as much access. I
Yes.
think that idea is being challenged and is challenged often by the biblical texts themselves. We have
Yes.
Huldah the prophetess. We have Isaiah's wife as a prophetess. There are texts which push women much more into the accepted and accessed. They've been given access to God through many of these texts. So it's not a bad deal. It's not that all women are excluded, and so that's at least part of my answer. Does that help at all, Miriam?
It helps greatly. I am not a feminist, but you have questions, through the
Yeah,
years about those things as a woman. So,
yeah.
thank you.
Hey, I
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
Look, Miriam, it
Great
is so
class
good.
today.
It's good to hear your voice, and I'm glad. I hope everything continues to work just like it does because we
I'll
have.
see y'all on the 19th.
All right, that's what I'm looking
All
forward
right.
to. I can't wait. Hey, thanks, Miriam. All right,
Bye
let me
bye.
see. Bye. I have Eric. I'm going to bring Eric up on the stage. My fellow Louisiana man, Eric. How are you, Eric? How's Caleb?
He's doing fine. He just turned over and groaned. I guess
Okay.
I'm taking off.
For those that don't know, Caleb is a dog. He's not. I'm not talking about one of his kids or anything. This his. Well, I don't know. He may not want to be called a dog. He's like your best friend. He hangs around all the time. He joins you for
Yeah,
classes.
but that's why I call him a dog, is because that's what Caleb means in modern
That's
Hebrew.
that's right.
You
You
know,
got
I
it.
mean, but you got to go back to the biblical definition to
Yeah.
understand what a dog is,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful thing. And that's what I wanted to say to two different things. One is Miriam. Uh, just remember that women were not made from dirt.
Yeah.
They were made from the first living son of Jehovah. So they're way above us men, and they don't need to be bothered with some of this stuff. They should feel special at not having to go with things because they are the bringers of life.
There you go. You just
Just
earned
a
all
person.
these points from all these women. You just won the award for the day, Eric. I guarantee you.
I've been known to do that on occasion. My
That's right.
second point is the zones we were talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that we looked at a great deal was that the camp in the wilderness was designed just like the temple.
Yeah.
Maybe I should say the other way. The temple was designed from that, and it was a level of protection is one aspect of it. Is they put that little tent in the middle of the next special group of tribes that guarded it, and then the outer ring of tribes, the wheel within the wheel,
Yeah.
protected from the outsiders first, so that he was protected in the middle. And you can also kind of point that toward how our bodies are designed as well, or should be.
Yeah.
So those are my two thoughts.
Hey, good thoughts as always. Yeah, I think, like I said, I remember. It, I'll have to look in my library, but I remember at least my first exposure. I'm sure that there are many, many others much, much earlier, but my first exposure to that thought, where you have the different levels and how there's a comparison between the garden and the tabernacle and the temple, and if I remember, the first exposure I had was Ernest Martin, and I can't remember which book it was, but some of my fun early reading learning stages. So good stuff. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
I see. Thank you, Eric. Hey, good to see you. And tell all your furry friends I said hello. And I am going to bring Betty. I see Betty has her hand up. Betty, I'm going to hopefully, let me see if I'll pull you up on stage again. Did that work? Did you want to come on stage, or I didn't know if your hand was still up and I missed it?
Yes, just really quickly, two things, and one is verse in the Holiness Code that I would like for you to comment on, if you don't mind, and that is in Leviticus 19:1, where it says Hashem speaks to Moses and says, "You shall be holy, for I'm holy." Would you just kind of comment on that? How
Well,
are
it's
we
certainly
holy as He is holy?
it is certainly a very, very challenging passage, and of course, we have plenty of other passages which say something pretty close to that. I mean, I remember in the past I've done studies on this where we looked at this call to be holy, and it is certainly something. In fact, I'm going to pull this up in my Bible so I can look at it. Yeah, you can also. In fact, I'm going to look at these other verses. If you look at Leviticus 11, verse 44 and 45 as well. 44, for I am the Lord your God. Consecrate, this is ESV, consecrate yourself therefore and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourself with any swarming thing. So this is this, and then verse 45, for I am the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. Now, and you get other passages which have this as well. This is a challenge. One thing to point out is that holy is plural here. You shall be holy is singular. Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I am holy. Every one of you. And then it starts breaking down. I like the way you did that. You introduced this as the holiness code. Scholars do refer to this, Leviticus 19, and actually it leads out of chapter 19 into 20, sometimes even 21, depending on where they break it. But these are certain rules which ancient Judaism, rabbis really pick up on this, say this is how you are holy. You know, these various listings. Not only is it hard enough to understand the idea of what does it mean to be holy and to grapple with that, but think about some of these things. It's some of the most challenging material in the Tanakh. It's one thing to say, love your neighbor as yourself. That's part of the holiness code. So if you want to know how to be holy, here's something I remember that I've thought about often, and other people have brought this up. Let's look at this one aspect of being holy. Love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, this is a big deal. First of all, do you realize that in order to do that, you have to love yourself for that to even make sense? How many people struggle with, they don't even like who they are? And so how can you possibly love someone else? And I know a lot of religious philosophers will say, no, it's all about you dying to yourself and you shouldn't love yourself. No, you have to love yourself. You have to love yourself so that you can love others. I think people often miss
God
that.
created you, and
That's right.
he, you know, to quote a colloquial saying, he did create junk. You
Yeah.
know, we're all special.
Yeah.
So,
So what are some of your thoughts? I do think that the holiness code is real important. I remember Richard Elliott Friedman, the Bible scholar. I really like his stuff. He said that if somebody told him, pack your bags, you're going to a deserted island, and by the way, you can only bring one chapter, you know, and he loves the Bible. He's like us. And he said, which chapter would it be? And he, without hesitation, said Leviticus 19. And I always thought, you know, that's interesting because there are things in Leviticus 19 that I love, and there are things that you know, maybe not. Let me do one more thing about Leviticus 19. I'm going to let people go spend the rest of their Shabbat in napping or whatever you'd like to do. Leviticus 19. One of the surprises about the Moses scroll, I think all of you probably, some of you may be new and not know what the Moses scroll is, but one of the things about the Moses scroll that I think is very interesting is that in Leviticus 19, it says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. This occurs right before the love your neighbor. But if you read it, and I'm reading the JPS here, you shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart, that's the Hebrew's brother. Reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your neighbor as yourself, your fellow as yourself. I am Jehovah. Now, this is all in the context of be holy. So if you're not to hate
Mm.
your brother in your heart, one thing that people tend, like if you tell me, here's a rule, don't steal. You're like, okay, well, I mean, I can refrain, even if it's something I really want from the store. I get it. I have to pay for it, so I shouldn't steal. But the Torah, the Pentateuch, has laws which get at the heart. Like you could say, well, I'm not going to beat that guy. I'm not going to take his stuff, my neighbor. You know, I don't like him. I'm not going to take his stuff. But to demand a certain internalization of that, you can't, even if you know, because some people say, no, it only matters what you do physically. But that's not true, is it? Holiness requires, as we say, it's an inside job. I think it begins on the inside. Fix
Mhm.
the inside. Look, if this coffee cup was clean on the outside and dirty on the inside, would you want to drink out of it? You clean the inside
No.
of the cup and the
Mm.
outside, not just the
Mhm.
outside. Anyway, those are some of my
Right.
thoughts, and certainly I know that others have thoughts as well. We have been going for over an hour and a half. You are a wonderful group. You've had some beautiful thoughts and expressed them very well. And I have a mission this afternoon to entertain two of my grandsons. So
Oh, how fun.
yeah, so I'm gonna be Saba doing the Saba role, and I'm gonna let all of you go have a wonderful Shabbat. And I look forward to seeing
Enjoy.
you again, all of you. And Betty, you're here now. You know how to do this. So don't
Oh,
miss
I'm here.
Tuesday. Now look, Jonah and I are now recording on Tuesday evenings. So I want to see, if possible, everyone who can, 7 p.m. Tuesday on the Yakad Live stage for those who support our group. Join us. Then Thursday, we'll air that on YouTube, that recording. Friday night, if Dave and Patty are able to, we're going to join them in their home. We'll let them let us know if that's going to happen or not. We'll advertise it, and then we'll see you again next Saturday. So how's that for a plan? Busy week. Be blessed.
Shabbat shalom and Shavua Tov, everybody. And thank you, Ross.
Hey, thank you, Betty. All right, everyone. Have a
Enjoy
beautiful
your
Shabbat.
afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Shabbat shalom. Shavua tov.